Welcome to Publishing Truth or Dare. In this workshop, I'll try to answer some questions you've always wanted to ask a publishing professional, but either didn't have the nerve or maybe just never had the opportunity. 15 questions came in, and I knew better than to try to answer them by myself. So I divided them into 3 categories and enlisted the help of some agents, authors, and editor friends. So who did I ask to help? You'll hear the combined wisdom of Steve Laube, Tamala Hancock Murray, James Scott Bell, James L. Rubart, Eva Marie Everson, Lissa Halls Johnson, and I'll chime in with an opinion once in a while. I divided the questions into agents only and agents only answers, agents and authors answers, authors only, editor only, and the last one I answered myself. So here we go. There are 4 agent-only questions. The first question I lumped into 3 short questions here. Why do I need an agent? How hard is it to find an agent? How does an agent get paid? Though I'm counting this as one question, we'll give it question A, B, and C as we move forward and answer it. The first part of our first question is a common one. Do I need an agent? Is asked by authors at every stage of their career. Before I begin with my answers, I'll tell you up front, the Steve Laube Agency represents me, so I'll refer to their blog several times in this video. But even if they weren't my representing agency, I still refer to their blog because the Laube Agency and the Books and Such blog have, in my opinion, some of the best information out there for Christian writers. Steve taught a class about why you need an agent at last year's ACFW conference. And Tamala wrote a great article on the agency's blog with the title, Do I Need an Agent? So I've included the link here on the slide. Now, many times a traditional publisher won't even receive a book proposal from an author directly. You must have an agent for that. Now, the exception, of course, is if you talk directly with an editor or at a writer's conference. But even then, an editor will oftentimes ask to speak to your agent before moving forward with a contract. Now, an agent also helps guide you through the legal jargon on contracts and can ask for a significantly higher advance than you would be able to when you're negotiating for yourself. But I think besides all that legal and technical stuff, an agent, they are your best friend in the industry who offers support and ongoing career advice. That's when the agent really shines. And so when you're searching for the right agent, look for someone who is a long-term partner, someone that you enjoy and that they enjoy you. I chose to contract with an agent for my 5th book, even though my first 2 contracts, each of them a 2-book contract. So I'd already published 4 books without an agent. But I signed with an agent for my 5th book because there was a publishing house who contacted me toward the end of my 2nd contract. And it wasn't Waterbrook Multnomah, by the way. But it freaked me out because I didn't know legally if I was even supposed to talk to another house when I was contracted with Revell. And so I wasn't sure what to do. So at the time, Karen Ball had just become an agent. So, and I knew her from other writing conferences. So I talked with her at an ACFW conference and said, what do I do? And do I need an agent? And she said, you needed an agent 4 books ago. Of course you need an agent. And so that's how I got connected with Karen Ball. And she became my agent, and I have had an agent ever since, and I have not once been sorry. So I am definitely a proponent. You need an agent. I feel very strongly about. Now, our second part of this question, is it hard to get an agent? Um, yes. The answer to that, unfortunately, is yes. But it's not impossible with good writing and a great project idea. Some agents receive, now think about this, over 2,000 proposals from writers in a single year. 2,000 in a year. Now you do the math. That's a ton every single day. That's in addition to the sometimes 80 to 100 clients they already care for and represent. So good agents, yes, they're hard to find, they're hard to get in with, but man, when you find one that you just click with, you have good chemistry, it is worth the effort when you find the right one for you. All right, that was our. Let's go on to question 1C. How does an agent get paid? An agent gets paid only when the author gets paid. That is a reputable agent. That's the deal. If any agent asks you for money up front, it is a red flag. Run, run, run. That is not the agent for you. That is not the agent you want. Question number 2 for our agents asks this. What is considered the average word count for a novel? Okay, I'm going to do something I hate. I'm going to say it depends on the genre. I hate it when people say it depends, but it really does. So the lobby agency blog, again, has a great article on this, and it goes into more detail than I can go into right now. So you can look that up on that article, but let me give you just some quick guidelines. A novella in general can range from 20 to 50,000. If you're writing for a subscription-based publisher, they're sometimes called category publishers, um, like Love Inspired or Guideposts books. They can go anywhere from 50 to 80K. And again, these are averages and in general kinds of things. And then if trade books, we're talking 80,000 to 100,000. But if you're writing an epic fantasy or historical novels, sometimes those go over 100,000. So those are approximates. Question number 3. How long should we wait before we nudge an agent after we've sent our proposals? Both agents said we should stick with the stated guidelines on their website. Now, what if an agent doesn't have guidelines stated on their website? Well, then wait about 6 weeks before we nudge them or knock on their door. One agent said, I'd prefer to be contacted by an author rather than not because it's possible for a proposal to be lost in cyberspace. But agents also want to let them know if the author signed with another agent or publisher before an agent responds to them, so the agent doesn't spend time evaluating their project. We as authors must also accept that sometimes not hearing from an agent is their answer. This has certainly happened to my best friend on a children's book. And you know what? It happened just recently, and it's frustrating, and I feel her frustration with her. But remember the volume of proposals that agents see, and it sometimes makes it impossible to respond to every single person, especially if it's going to just be a no. So now we're going to move on. Here we are on our last question for agents only, and it's a terminology question. I've also heard the term proposal package. What is that, and why is it important? My agency doesn't use the term proposal package, but they had this to say. Please see our proposal guidelines on our website. We would consider this to be a proposal package since it's a large document and it's meant to help editors prepare for their meetings with various committees. So it's important for us to understand that this proposal that we're preparing isn't just to get an agent. And really, it's not the editor who makes the final decision as to whether we get a contract or not. Yes, they're the first guardian at the door, but the editor, once they are sold on your writing and sold on your idea, they then become your champion and take your idea to the various committees, the publication committee, the sales committee, the marketing committee. All of those committees have to be as sold on your writing and your project as that editor and as that agent in order for you to get a contract. And so the proposal that you write, it becomes a package in order to sell all of these different people and all these committees, if you're going with a trad house, so that they can be your champion ultimately to the buyers at the online retailers or the brick and mortar stores who are actually going to sell then to the readers. All right, let's look at our 5 questions to both agents and authors. It was interesting when I polled my publishing buddies on these questions because sometimes the agents and authors gave different perspectives. So I'll let you know which constituency had what to say as I give you the answers. And here's the first question. And again, this one has 2 parts to it. Are people buying more ebooks than hard copies? And what about audiobooks? Let's look at these questions from the agent's perspective. The agent, first and foremost, says it depends on who you ask. With fiction, it's 60% ebook. But lots of royalty statements say otherwise, this agent said. Some better, some worse, of course, right? And then nonfiction is closer to 30% ebook, which I agree with that. I don't buy nearly as many nonfiction ebooks as I do fiction because a nonfiction book, I want to highlight, I want to know which page it's on, the highlight. I see it in my head, the actual page. And what does he say about audiobooks? Steve told me this. I love this example. He always gives me facts and figures and then examples that I can understand it with. He says, though audiobooks are growing, the agent, Steve, I'll just go ahead and tell you, cautioned us to be careful how we read these statistics. For example, if an author sells 10 books this year and 20 next year, that's 100% growth. And we think, oh my, how exciting, right? But that means you only sold 20 audiobooks in a year. So typically, audio sales, when you look at it over an entire year, is really only 2 to 5% of the total number of ebooks and physical books. That means in real numbers, if you sell 100 books, you might sell only 5 audios. Now, keep in mind, this is from an agent's perspective, who they see a wide cross-section of fiction and nonfiction authors. So now let's hear what the authors have to say about this. All right, from an author's perspective. Now remember, I asked 3 different authors, and I'll chime in here too. So one author said, ebooks definitely higher sales, especially in specific genres. Audiobook sales seem to be growing, that same author said. Another author said ebooks are a strong segment, but they didn't take over, as was predicted. So no, physical books are still in the lead. And then another author said, audiobooks, oh, look out. It's the fastest growing segment. If you can, get an audiobook version of your story out there. Now, agents and authors both agreed that audiobooks are growing. So honestly, I would agree with the audiobook craze. Now, I'm going to give you my sales numbers in percentages, of course, on the 2 books that I've had released in all 3 formats at the same time. So 2 of my 12 books released have released in print, ebook, and audiobook all on the same day. And the ones that did that, here are the percentages of sales so far to date. Print books, 38% sales. Ebooks, 38% sales. Audiobooks, 24% of my sales. Does it surprise you how evenly those sales have been dispersed? So the books now that have been released without audio, those print books were 55% of my sales and ebooks were 45% of my sales. So do you see how very subjective sales numbers are? Honestly, it depends on your tribe. It depends on your readers. That's what I've learned from this question and from polling both agents and authors. So my advice to you is get to know your readers and you'll know what format they want, especially if you're an indie author. That's super important for you. Now, the next question was also very revealing. So question number 2 for both authors and agents. Do I need to pay for an edit before submitting my manuscript to an agent? Well, the agents say, if you feel it's necessary. Kind of a, sort of, maybe, but the authors say, oh, absolutely, absolutely. And here's what one author said, agents and editors want a book that is 98% of the way there, not 90 or 95. But agents and authors absolutely agree that it's crucial to present your absolute best to an agent. You have only one opportunity to present that particular project to that particular agent. So make it count. Okay, next we're going to go into some technical and terminology kinds of questions. So question number 3. What is POD publishing? It stands for Print on Demand. It's the ability to print 1 copy at a time or 1,000 or thousands. It's an option for those who don't want to invest in a longer print run and have 100 boxes in your garage forever. However, each book's cost is exponentially larger than if a larger press run is done. For example, your pod might cost $7 to print one book. Cost is based generally on page count, but if you print 5,000, your per book cost might only be $2. So you do pay for it more. Amazon defaults to pod publishing, so if you dispense your book through Amazon, if you're indie publishing and you do it through Amazon, they're going to automatically do it as print on demand. Oh, and speaking of indie authors, let's go that direction now. Question number 4. From an agent's perspective, who holds the copyright after my book is published? The agent says your contract will specify. So look at your contract. Hopefully the copyright is in your name. Basically, each publishing house is going to be a little different in how they do that. This is the norm that at least that's what the agent says, that the publisher is going to allow you to keep the copyright. But in the past, there were some publishers who put the copyright in the name of the publisher, which meant they owned the rights to the work in perpetuity. That means like forever until 1,000 generations. And that's okay if the writer did a work for hire project and relinquished the rights. Now that's from the agent's perspective. Let's look at this question from the writer's perspective. So who holds it from the writer's perspective? The traditionally published writers say, my publisher owns the copyright. And that is the case in my books. My publishers own the copyright once I sign that contract. Indie published, the authors own the copyright. Now, about copyrights for a little bit. Here's another question. Should I register my copyright? This copyright question comes up frequently. Now, the law says the moment we write something, it's copyrighted to us. But how do we prove that if someone steals our stuff, right? That's when the hard stuff begins. Both one agent and one author suggested indie published authors register their published works with the Copyright Office. However, one author who I asked actually has a law degree, and he declined to comment. So I'm going to stick with him and decline to offer any legal advice right now. So this kind of question is really best directed to a literary attorney. It's really much deeper than we can go into here. The only thing that I'll add is that one agent warned indie authors that if you register your book as your copyrighted material, and then a traditional publisher comes along and wants to contract it, things could really get sticky. So, all right, now let's move on and talk about question number 1 in our authors only questions. How much time do we spend marketing? And I changed that to marketing because the actual question said, how much of my writing time should be spent on social media presence? Marketing these days is so much more than social media. It involves newsletters, it involves your website and blog, it involves speaking even sometimes. Publishers are looking more nowadays at newsletter numbers than they are at Facebook or Instagram followers. They're even starting to look more at YouTube subscribers than Facebook followers. The social media world is just constantly changing, and so our marketing world has to change with it. So, and honestly, that's just a whole nother discussion. So you've We've got 4 traditionally published authors who are going to answer this question for you now. So one of us says an hour a day. The next one says 10% of your writing time. The other one says 20% of your writing time. And I'm going to tell you, well, wait, before we move on to what I'm going to say, let's look at this 20% thing. I love this answer. This is a mathematician if I ever heard one. This one says if 80% of a book's sales come from word of mouth, then I'd suggest spending 80% of your time on craft and 20% on promotion and marketing. Isn't that wonderful? I love that. My answer is 1 day a week. I heard years ago, I heard Susie May Warren speak at a conference, and she did all of her marketing 1 day a week. I tried that and I love it. So my assistant knows that I'm available on Mondays, and that's my 20%. I actually work 6 days, but that's okay. It's about 20%, a little bit less, and that works for me. So I would encourage you to find what works for you, whether it's a percentage or whether it's a specific amount of time, and then stick to that. That's the important part. Discipline yourself to stick. All right, our second authors only question got under one of my author's skin a little bit. Is indie publishing becoming more acceptable? Well, right away. Oh my goodness. I got this response. Acceptable to whom? And who cares? Many writers are making a lot of money apart from traditional publishing. Well, so there you go. You officially have permission to indie publish. But in all seriousness, all 4 of us authors agreed indie publishing has come a long, long way in the last 20 years. And as far as the difference in self-publishing and quote indie publishing, self-publishing is the more individualistic term, I guess. Indie publishing has become a more useful term, and frankly, it just sounds, as one of our authors put it, cooler. It's become the somewhat classier terminology, but to be successful, you need to operate as a small business. So I've actually heard these 2 terms differentiated like this. Self-publishing means you haven't paid for any professional services to publish it. Indie published means it has been professionally designed, edited, and will be marketed with a small business mentality. In the indie world today, professionalism is what separates the hobbyists from those who actually sell books. Now, I know you may be out there thinking, Misu, I don't have the money to pay for all that. I didn't either when I started out. So here's what you do. You network, which is exactly what you're doing now by attending writers' conferences and workshops. And I know this is virtual, but still get a list of people that participate in a local writers group, or ACFW has online critique groups. Find a way to network with other Christian writers, with other indie writers, and do this very solitary thing that we do, this writing, this solitary business, in a way that you can do it with people and people who can help you, and it'll make a huge difference for you. When you get to know people in the publishing world, you can trade your skills. That's what networking is about. My current assistant, she started out as a reader who contacted me after reading my debut novel back in 2011. As our friendship grew, she now works for me. So let the Lord bring people into your life who will partner with you to come alongside you in this publishing journey. He's faithful if you let him guide you and guide the timing of each step. Okay, that was a little bit of preachiness. Our third author-only question is, I see ads on Facebook and get emails from companies that want to help me self-publish. What is a ballpark money figure for how much I'd need to pay these people? Our first author, he's pretty hardcore. He says, spend zero. Learn to do it all yourself. Our second author says some companies charge as much as $5,000 to $20,000, and most of them aren't worth it. Our third author was a little more encouraging and said it depends on the type of book. A 100,000 word novel will cost more to publish than a work for children. But even this author says, I would do a lot of research before jumping into a company I found online. And I would also explore traditional publishing long and hard before going indie. I also wanted to just make a quick comment about paid ads and what it does to your sales. Facebook ads, Amazon ads, I've tried them both. I've tried BookBub ads even. And unless they're running concurrently on several different sites, they really aren't very helpful. So unless you can run them on several different sites at the same time, I have not seen a bump in my sales from those ads. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of throw that in there too. That this seemed like a good question to throw that in. All right, our next question is for those who have counted the cost, done the research, and are ready to indie publish. All right, this fourth question for authors only. How do I get my book listed on Amazon if I don't go with a traditional publisher? Well, Amazon has made this process incredibly easy with KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. And so I'm going to put up the link there for you. I've given you the US link. And basically you just go to that link and you set up your account. Writing the book though is just the beginning for an indie author. Though I've only published one indie novella and my other books have all been with traditional publishers, I started writing and publishing novellas regularly. Every time I launch a traditional book, I publish a prequel that I give away on my website. And so I purchased a publishing software called Vellum. I mentioned my indie book. It's called By the Waters of Babylon earlier, I think. If you look, you'll see that By the Waters of Babylon is book 2 in the Psalm series that I wrote with 2 other biblical fiction authors, and both of them are strictly indie. Now, I would never have dipped my toes into the indie waters had it not been for their help. So again, networking is key for a positive indie experience. There are lots of Facebook groups available to you now, and other indie authors in the Christian market are often happy to help new authors. So I'll say this again, if you're publishing your book yourself, make sure you do it well. Just like presenting your material to an agent, you'll likely only get one chance to impress a reader. So let's say you do great marketing, readers find your book on Amazon and they buy it, but then they find a poorly written book or one with lots of typos. You're going to lose that reader for good. And then that leads us now to, for our fifth author-only question, I called in freelance editor Lissa Halls-Johnson. Lissa has been my line editor on all 3 Christie-nominated books, including Isaiah's Daughter that won in 2018. The Year of Fire and Lions was nominated. She went to the Christie ceremony with me, and though my book didn't win, 2 other books that she edited did win. This gal knows a thing or two about editing. So she's who I called to answer the following question. I understand there are different types of editors. I hear terms like content editor and copy editor. What's the difference? And do I need both? So Lissa explained to me when I asked her that question that there are 4 different types of edits. And though every publisher has a different process, these are a general outline of the process. So first is a content editor. This is an editor who does sometimes it's called a substantive edit, and they look at the book as a whole. This editor suggests rewrites on characters, plot, pacing, and other big picture things. When the author finishes all those rewrites, he or she returns the finished manuscript to the content editor, and then after it's approved, it's then sent to the line editor. Line editor's job is to make sure that the author has fulfilled the requirements of that first substantive edit, and then the line editor goes over the story line by line. There you go. That's why a line editor. And they check all those nitpicky details. So does the character still have blue eyes in this scene? But when they had, or did they have brown later on, that kind of thing. Does this paragraph work as it's written, or are the sentences maybe out of order? Are these scenes working? Do we need another scene in between it? Does it seem to be more powerful here? Does it need to be more powerful there? Does this scene need to be cut entirely? I mean, a line editor basically polishes the story through and through. When the author then makes her or his suggested edits, the manuscript once again goes back to the senior editor or executive editor of the house, and it's then delegated to a copy editor. Now, a copy editor looks at the book word by word. This person is the grammar expert, the person who makes sure every punctuation mark is in line, makes sure that the quotes are accurate, references are precise, all those technical things. Now, they're not really supposed to touch the story at all, though sometimes they still find things to fine tune. And when the author makes the copy editor's adjustments, the manuscript once again goes back and it changes hands now for the 4th time to proofreaders. Now, the proofreaders, they usually are given the book on 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper called galleys that have been photocopied after the manuscript has been typeset. So it looks like book pages that have been photocopied onto regular pieces of paper. The proofreaders are to look at this manuscript character by character. So do you see how we go from that big picture edit of the content editor all the way down to then line by line, word by word, and now character by character for the proofreader. And they need to see that everything, every single little jot and tittle is in place. In most traditional publishing houses, they have multiple proofreaders reading this manuscript at the same time. Now, for an indie author, it is not good business to pay for all 4 of these steps. You just can't afford that. I don't know any indie author who can afford that. However, even though it may be costly, if you hope to actually sell your book, it has to stand up to the traditional house competition in every way. So the writing has to be stellar, the cover has to look professional, and please, please do a better job at catching typos than some of the traditional publishers have been doing of late. Did I just say that out loud? Oh dear, this is truth or dare, right? All right, so Liz's advice to indie publishers was this. She said, if at all possible, get a professional content edit and line edit. And then my suggestion to you is then to enlist 4 to 6 family members or friends, but I got to tell you, go with a family because they can't unfriend you on Facebook, and have them proofread your electronic file before uploading it for publication. It's tempting, I know, to rush the editing process, but when you've put so much hard work into a book, please don't ruin the months, even years of sweat equity by cutting corners in this home stretch. Yes, you do need both. You need both of those edits. It's very, very important. Our last question. I thought I'd answer this one myself. How long does it take with a traditional publisher from the time you sign a contract with them until your book is actually published? What happens during that time frame? Since I'd worked with 3 different publishers, I thought I'd go ahead and just kind of give you my perspective on it. We've already touched on the editing process a little bit, so you understand that a little. Revell and Waterbrook, those were my first 2 publishers that I'd worked with. They're considered traditional houses. Guidepost Books is considered a subscription-based or a category house. With both Revell and Waterbrook Multnomah, the time from signing my contract to publication was right around a year, sometimes a little bit less, depending on how long the negotiations for the contract lasted. Typically, however, I had a pretty good idea of which book they wanted, so I would start researching right away. With Guideposts, it only was about 8 months from signing to publication because honestly, it was half the size of my normal novels. It only required 2 edits, and they had already started the marketing plan way before my book because it was a part of a series, a larger series, and my book was number 17 in that series. So I simply directed folks to the Ordinary Women of the Bible page on the Guideposts site, and voila, my marketing's done. So and here's the thing, it's that marketing and publicity piece that adds time for a traditional house that many of us don't even realize. So as I mentioned in a previous workshop, I think the marketing sales folks, they need time to formulate their strategies. So soon after I sign my contract, I receive a 15-page author questionnaire that blossoms into, yeah, about 30 pages by the time I've answered all those questions. I then return it to the marketing folks, and then about 6 months before release, I receive back from them a 4 to 6 page document outlining their marketing and publicity plan that includes which print, online, and media outlets they intend to request interviews with for me, as well as what portion of their marketing and publicity budget will be spent on my new release. So they also then take that plan to their sales team at that 6 month before release mark. And so do you see how in order for them to do their jobs for that period of time before release, I have to give them that questionnaire to give them something to think about and work on while I'm researching and writing for that period of time. And sometimes I have to answer that questionnaire before I've even written a single word on my manuscript. Now, that can make ideas for my cover and writing back cover copy pretty challenging when I haven't even thought through the details of my plot, and even though I still outline, I'm very much still a pantser when it comes to writing with my emotions and doing the little details and honestly the little twists and turns that come through the plot. So it is difficult to do that. However, learning these publishing cycles and how my partners at that publishing house work, it's really helped prepare me for the demands that are placed on me. So if you do get contracted with a publisher, it is entirely appropriate after the ink has dried on that contract and you've signed it, but please let the ink dry before you start asking these questions. But ask your editor, what is the full process going to look like from start to finish? And let them tell you that. Let them talk to you about it. Now, if you're an indie author, setting self-imposed deadlines, that is the way that my successful indie author friends stay on a schedule of writing and releasing books that keep their readers hungry for more. That is the secret of indie publishing. Quick releases. Every 6 months is what my most successful indie author friends, that's about how often they release a book, because folks will forget about you if you don't have that big marketing machine behind you, if you're not cranking out books pretty quickly. So that's the time and tasks from contract to publication. All right, now, yay, we're done with questions. That's it for all the questions that were submitted. But if you have other questions, or if something I've said sparked a deeper question about a topic maybe that we've already covered, we will have more time in our live Q&A session on the day of the OCW Winter Conference. That is this Saturday, February 20th, from 1 p.m. to 2:30 Pacific time. This is OCW's first ever virtual conference, so I'm excited to be a part of it with you. Be sure to write down any other questions you have and feel free to ask anything writing related. I'm an open book. Get it? Open book. Yeah. Oh, grown. Okay. I will try to keep those silly comments to myself, and I look forward to chatting more with you on Saturday. I'll see you then.